Good evening, tributes, and welcome back to another Tales of the Hunger Games After 100 episode. Before I start this video, I'd like to tell you all that there are spoilers from previous episodes currently in this video, not in this series. Why did I put series there? Anyways, in this video, there are spoilers from past episodes. So if you have not seen any of the past episodes and you don't want to be spoiled, then please watch the past episodes before this episode. Also, I'd like to apologize for this weird, battery bar, weird bar thingy on the side of my screen. I have no idea what that is. I don't know how to get rid of it. It's like some sort of, antivirus or something. But, yeah. I'd also like to thank Christian Blanco for creating the series in the first place, as well as Andrew Maclaine for creating some of the art used in the videos. Also, in this video, this is a war, an important piece of the lore for the series. So there will be a lot of characters. If you're confused about the characters, please refer to a Google spreadsheet listed in the description of the video. But without further ado, let's hop straight into the video. In the cockpit of this battle hovercraft were Gale Hawthorne and Oregon Luther. Although scientists question to this day how the rebels were able to preserve Oregon's brain and create a body for him, it is generally agreed that the equipment used was destroyed a few days prior to the start of the games. The fatal flyer was able to steer the hovercraft away from the hovercraft in hot pursuit. Many missiles were launched at the hovercraft, including heat-seeking ones, but a 66-year-old Gale Hawthorne was able to set off flares to distract the heat-seeking ones and launched massive force field shields to protect the blow of the normal missiles. In the back of the hovercraft, Bravo Malayev strapped Viscera into a safety chair and told her that they would explain what was happening later. Viscera seemed shocked and yelled that the Capitol had murdered Michelle in the holding room. However, Aroma Paddock stepped out from behind the chair and comforted Viscera. She informed her that they knew, and further reassured Viscera. The hovercraft then took a tight turn, which caused Aroma to yell something at Oregon. Viscera then began to cry and apologized about what had happened with Wade. However, Aroma comforted her and told her that there was nothing she could have done. She told Viscera that she should keep calm, as they would be reaching their destination soon. Shouts were heard from the cockpit as Gale yelled something into his communications microphone. Loud explosions were heard from behind the hovercraft as the pursuing Capitol hovercraft exploded. Later inspection revealed that the clever people of District 6 had added self-destruct mechanisms on Capitol hovercraft since the 70th Hunger Games. This self-destruct mechanism had never been spotted by Capitol inspectors and was designed to activate only when a certain signal was sent out. This signal was so specific and meant to be so secretive that only certain members of District 6's community were trusted with instructions on how to produce it. Different parts of the instructions were split among different members of the community, which meant that all 7 keepers of the instructions had to be present to produce this signal. Fortunately, Rebel Commander Maxima Liu was able to track down these individuals, and along with Giff Schneider, they were able to produce the signal just in time. When the hovercraft landed in a private cave just south of Panem's border, a force field was immediately erected over the cave, and all radar signals towards the capital were suppressed by highly advanced Rebel technology. On the outside, the cave looked like a normal cave. However, on the inside, it was similar to the setting seen in action films. The hovercraft landed gently in a pool of water, and a bridge rose out of the water, connecting the exit of the hovercraft to the main settlement inside the cave. This cave was located within a massive mountain, and was built to hold the rebels. The mountain itself was located within a land that was once known as Brazil. Aroma, Bravo, Gale, Oregon, and Viscera were greeted by Chief Jaworski as they descended the hovercraft. Chief greeted them and told the adults that Zale was waiting to show Viscera her room. Gale nodded and asked Chief if he had any news about moving. Chief shook his head and simply replied that they were planning on moving to the rainforest in a few weeks. Gale sighed and grabbed a mug from the shelf before telling Viscera to follow Chief. He then led Aroma, Bravo, and Oregon through a massive door that led to the rebel base. The rebel base was split into over 200 different rooms, each with either the purpose of storage, shelter, or utility. As Sheaf led Viscera to her bedroom, he explained that the people of District X had been building this mountain fortress since the Reclamation. Sheaf also explained that even though this base was massive, they would be moving to a different settlement soon, which had also been built by the people of District X. As they walked, he told Viscera that this settlement was above the ground and was heavily armed with many walls and anti-aircraft equipment. He also informed her that this base was located in a land formerly known as Brazil. Once Sheaf had taken Viscera to her room, he told her that the instructions on using their room were self-explanatory. He then told Viscera to get a good night of rest, as the surgeons would see her the first thing next morning. Viscera shouted at Sheaf about who the surgeons were. However, Sheaf told her to get to sleep, before locking the door and leaving for his room. Alone in her room, Viscera turned on the TV, which was broadcasting Capitol News. She quickly turned it off upon seeing the smoke and dust scattered around the Capitol, and switched the channel to some of the local District X channels. Long ago, before the Hunger Games or Panem even existed, the disasters of North America forced the citizens to leave and find shelter elsewhere. Some of these citizens formed Panem, a country that emerged into a mighty nation. But after the first rebellion, the country cut off communication with other outside nations. Therefore, the citizens of Panem worked many years for the capital. Half of the citizens to have survived the disasters of North America escaped to a land known as South America. In South America, the existing population had been wiped out by a plague hundreds of years before the disasters of North America, which understandably made some of the newcomers cautious. Unfortunately for them, the disease had infected the monkeys native to South America. However, the monkeys had developed immunity. When the newcomers arrived in South America, the monkeys passed on the disease to the newcomers, wiping out almost half the population. This caused the newcomers to panic, but with leadership, expertise, and communication, the group was able to extract a piece of DNA from the monkeys, and with it replicated, they developed the same immunity to the disease. This disease is what gave them the advantage when the capital attempted to claim the settlement for themselves. The soldiers sent there never returned, and when their bodies were found, autopsies revealed that they had all died from the disease. The capital's failure was never passed down, as during the early rule of President Ravenstill, he was dismayed at the failure to capture the district, and ultimately ordered all records documenting the events of the failed raid to be burned. The people of District X had formerly called themselves Ragnarok. However, after being attacked by the capital, they changed their name to District X, as they felt it was contrary to the capital's desires. The people of District X later grew their nation over the years by reproducing and building massive structures within the rainforest they lived in, all of which were concealed by the tall trees. The government of the civilization was well organized, as the citizens were pleased with each other's jobs. In their spare time, the people of the district enjoyed playing sports that had been passed down through the generations, as well as performing in the arts and hunting. After waking up in the morning, Viscera was escorted out of her room by Solomon Grew. He explained to her that the surgeons would be checking for any injuries sustained in the arena. This made Viscera ask about her tracker. However, Solomon told her that her tracker had been deactivated before they had even left the arena. Viscera then reached the operating room, where Crimson Mellick waited. Crimson shook Viscera's hand and ran a brief set of medical tests on her, but she was shown not to have sustained any major injuries. Crimson then removed Viscera's tracker from her arm, although the tracker had already split into two pieces before he did so. Once Viscera was released from the surgical room, Solomon told her that she would be meeting Maxima Liu, who was leading the rebel battalion. He proceeded to take Viscera to a meeting room, where Maxima waited. Maxima motioned for Viscera to sit down across the table from her. She then told Solomon that he was excused. In the meeting room, Maxima informed Viscera that they were planning to overthrow the capital, and to restore peace to the districts. She told Viscera that in order to do this, they were planning to launch attacks on the capital and take out the peacekeepers. Slowly, Viscera then asked Maxima why they wanted her to be present. However, Maxima clapped her hands and the wall shrunk away, revealing a glass tank. Inside the tank, President Cardew and the Gulf 5 were contained, with masks attached to their mouths, which supplied oxygen. Maxima explained that the president and his guards would be held hostage and executed when the capital was overthrown. She admitted that this was to cause a lack of leadership in the capital. Viscera seemed overflowing with questions. However, Maxima told her to wait patiently, as her questions would most likely be answered over the course of her stay in the settlement. Maxima then told Viscera that all of the residents within the settlement would be attending a mandatory meeting in the general meeting room, which she called the cornucopia, for lunch. She requested that Viscera attend as well. At lunchtime, all the residents of the mountain base entered the cornucopia, which was not in any way related to an actual cornucopia. Instead, it was the center of the mountain, and within there was a long table which held lots of food, drink, cutlery, and snacks. At one end of the table, Maxima sat. She told Viscera that she would be sitting at the other end of the table. Before lunchtime began, Maxima silenced the group and made her announcement, in which she introduced Viscera. She then ordered everyone to introduce themselves to Viscera. Sitting to Viscera's right, Ava Barrick introduced herself as the lead outfit designer for the group. Across from Ava, her 13-year-old son, Denham, introduced himself. Beside Denham, Sandy Snow's 13-year-old son, Deck, sat. Across from Deck, his mother, Sandy, told Viscera that she commanded the rivers around the settlement. After Sandy had introduced herself, Focus Snow told Viscera that he was in charge of fishing in the rivers, and jokingly told Viscera that he was Deck's father. Across from Focus, Finnick O'Dare Jr. sat, with his daughter beside him. Finnick stated that he led a battalion of District X soldiers, while his wife, Carell, said the same. Finnick's daughter, Megs, introduced herself as the lead babysitter, which made some of the kids at the table scowl. Other individuals down the table included Ava's husband, Sheer Cartwright, Santo Melvin Mellark, Rue Melvin Mellark, Katniss Melvin Mellark, Crimson Mellark, Plasma Mellark, Diploid Mellark, Haploid Mellark, Fuji Schneider, Gif Schneider, Gif and Fuji's 6 children, Delphine Campbell, Aron Campbell, Bloom and Easter Campbell, their 6-year-old twins, Atomica Perez, Lynette Laurier, Starling Laurier, Gerania Landry, Ivona Landry, Iris Landry, Limerick Manx, Chief Javorsky, Annie Cresta, Madison Hawker, Tridica MacDonald, Dollar Crusoe. I'm lost. Petunia Crusoe, Quartz and Hazel Crusoe, Asha Seidel, Ariadne Fling, Zale Core, Hunter Core, Delmar Core, Wither McCain, Solomon Grew, Fleming Grew, Bravo Malayev, Aroma Paddock, Gail Hawthorne, Easter Rolex, Tulip Rolex, Millet Rolex, Root Rolex, Bluebell Rolex, and reincarnations of Baffin Herricks, Oregon Luther, Nat Charles, Bark Berjak, Clara Paranova, Begonia Shanks, Thibaut Girardeau, and Restoro Diggs. That was a mouthful. Throughout lunch, Viscera was offered many different food combinations by the other residents of the settlement. Although she enjoyed some delicacies, she chose not to eat second servings of others. Ava and Denham informed Viscera of the different people and their positions, as well as the rooms within the settlement as lunch went on. Once most people had finished eating, the rooms within the settlement Maxima rang a bell, which caused everyone to go silent. She then informed people that Game Maker Blanco had been held hostage within the capital, and that their next mission would be to rescue him. She explained that their plan was to use raw force and fight their way into the capital's top security lab, where he was being held hostage. She also told the group that during his final few moments as head game maker, he had saved Viscera's life by telling her to climb onto the cornucopia. This had allowed her to avoid an electric shock sent out across the ground, which had been done by President Flickerman to weaken the tributes. Maxima then dismissed the group and told them to be prepared for anything. Once they were dismissed, almost everyone came to Viscera to introduce themselves. The adults each told Viscera their names and their roles within the settlement, while the District Victor reincarnations only stated that they were there for their knowledge. The settlement also featured a large number of district citizens who were there to assist the rebels with their plethora of knowledge. Unlike the adults, the children were responsible for cleaning and washing the dishes. Mangzo Dare, 21-year-old daughter of Finnick Jr. and Carell, and Iris Landry, 20-year-old daughter of Ivona and Gervania Landry, were in charge of supervision and cleanup. They watched over the younger children while disposing of all the trash and sweeping the floors. Root Rolex, 20-year-old son of Easter and Tulip Rolex, Millet Rolex, 17-year-old daughter of Easter and Tulip, Starling Laurier, 16-year-old adopted daughter of Lilith Laurier, and Alpha Schneider, 16-year-old daughter of Gif and Fuji Schneider, washed and dried the dishes in the big kitchen sink, while the younger children worked on gathering the plates and delivering them to the kitchen. After spending some time watching, Viscera ran over and began to help. However, Crimson Mellark, brother of Rue Mellark, stopped her and told her to leave the kids alone. Viscera then explicitly requested to help out. However, Crimson stated that if she did, some of the younger kids would argue about who wouldn't need to help out. After most of the adults had gone to their rooms or workplaces within the settlement, the kids ran over to introduce themselves to Viscera. Viscera was happy to meet with them, and most of them invited her over to their leisure room to relax. Happy to be near someone, Viscera followed Diploid Mellark, 14-year-old son of Crimson Mellark, to the leisure room, where there were no adults present. Diploid immediately turned on the television, which was broadcasting a local Gridiron football match. Diploid began to explain the rules to Viscera. However, his 10-year-old sister, Haploid, walked over and showed Viscera some of the art supplies at the back. Viscera agreed to draw with Haploid. However, she told her that she would be listening to Diploid talk first. Throughout the remainder of the day, Viscera spent a lot of time meeting and forming bonds with the kids. And once dinner time rolled by, she seemed exhausted. This made Megs pat her on the shoulder and tell her that she would be dealing with a lot of this throughout. Iris then walked over and told Viscera that they would soon be moving into their new settlement soon, and there they would have much more space to roam around. At dinner that night, Maxima turned on the television, which projected onto a big screen behind her. She explicitly changed the channel to Capital TV, which was currently broadcasting an important announcement. The newly elected president, Hal Neveron, had taken the podium in Snow Square. She held up a hand to silence all the listeners, before speaking directly to the camera. She told all citizens of the capital to stay at home and to have weapons in case any rebels raided their homes. She also spoke directly to the rebels, and told them that the capital was well aware of where they were, and told them to stop planning any attacks or else there would be serious consequences. She then ended her announcement by showing a picture of Game Maker Blanco being held hostage. Maxima then turned off her television and told the rest of the settlement that tomorrow they would be heading to their new base near District X. Dinner was then served, and it progressed rather silently. After a final night of sleep in the mountain, the settlement prepared their luggage and met in the cornucopia. Maxima told the group that to get to District X, they would be traveling in groups, and informed them that she would be in the last group, ensuring that everyone had entered the city safely. Before leaving, she asked if anyone had any questions about the journey. Echo Schneider, 12 years old, asked if they would be allowed to pick their groups. However, Maxima stated that she had already chosen their groups. Maxima pulled out a piece of paper and announced that Viscera, the Mellarks, the Schneiders, and the Campbells would be traveling first, before motioning to Aran Campbell, who had taken down a painting revealing a door. Aran held the door open as the youngest entered first. Ray Schneider, 6 years old, Delta Schneider, 8 years old, Gamma Schneider, 10 years old, and Echo Schneider, 12 years old, entered first. Rue Melvin Mellark then led her 5-year-old daughter, Katniss, through the door, as Delphine did the same with her 6-year-old twins, Bloom and Easter. As the rest of the settlement watched, Plasma Mellark, wife of Crimson Mellark, led Diploid and Haploid through the door, and motioned for Viscera to follow. Once Gif, Fuji, and Crimson had entered through the door, Aran saluted Maxima and shut the painting behind him. The door led to a massive underground train station. Although there were rarely any visitors to District X, there was a strict security procedure for anyone new who did choose to enter. A robot scanned the retinas and fingerprints of all newcomers before opening a train door and telling them to wear their seatbelts throughout the ride. The group then entered the train, and a countdown timer of 60 began, which was the time until the doors closed and the train began to move. Due to the large number of people in Gif's family, they took up 2 of the rows of 4 in the train, with Gif sitting in the front row and Fuji in the back. Crimson, Plasma, Diploid, and Haploid had also chosen to sit together for the ride, and behind them, Delphine, Aran, Bloom, and Easter had chosen to do the same. Viscera seemed unsure of where to sit. However, Rue allowed her to sit beside her. Viscera thanked Rue as she sat down beside Rue, who was sitting with Katniss in between her and Santo. Once the countdown had reached 0, an automated female voice told all passengers to buckle their seatbelts, although everyone had done so already. The train then began to accelerate slowly, but soon it had reached a very fast speed. Although there were lights in the tunnel, they were very dim, since the train did not operate very frequently. On the other hand, the inside of the train was very well lit, which allowed Viscera to see that the adults had held onto their kids' hands throughout the ride. Occasionally, the train would make a sharp turn or move upwards over a bump. This explained why the passengers were told to buckle their seatbelts. After about a 10-minute ride, the train reached another station. Aran told everyone not to unbuckle. Once the train had completely stopped, Aran allowed the group to unbuckle. The group then stepped out of the train and onto a platform, where they were marveled by the fine architecture of the underground train station. A security guard stood at the door, and upon seeing the group, he asked for the leader. Aran stepped forward and announced that he was Aran Campbell, and was representing Maxima Liu. The guard nodded and pulled out a retinal scanner and a fingerprint scanner. After scanning everyone, he opened the door and told them that their DNA tests would be done at the front gates of the city. He bid them good day and went back to standing. Before they had even reached the gates, the city of District X was clearly very big. The only entrance to the city lay at the front, as the rest of the city was guarded by large walls, which were patrolled by guards, radar, turrets, and guard dogs. The group had exited through an exit in the ground, which actually lay outside the city walls. This time, there were clearly more security guards guarding the entrance. Nevertheless, Aran stepped forward and stated his name to the guards. They nodded and led the group to the entrance, where more guards were present. Unlike the white peacekeeper outfits of the capital, these guards were dressed in green and blue, which were the colors of the District X flag. At the gates, a guard introduced himself as Tristan. He kindly led the group into a large holding room. Once there, he told them that he was the lead gatekeeper and was in charge of registering any new visitors to District X's population database. Tristan told them that they had already completed the retina and fingerprint scanning parts of registration. However, they still had to have their DNA recorded. Tristan explained that to do this, they would need to extract some cells from each person's cheek. Haploid asked how these cells would be extracted, which made Tristan smile politely and pull out a small stick, with a cotton-like substance at the end of it. It's a Q-tip. He asked if there were any volunteers, and Aran stepped forwards. Tristan asked Aran to open his mouth, which Aran did. He then rubbed the end of the stick on the side of Aran's cheek. Once done, he removed the stick and placed it in a small container and recorded Aran's name on it. This seemed to comfort the kids, and soon Tristan had called in several of his colleagues to help him get samples from other members of the group. Once the DNA sampling had been completed, Tristan told them that they would be taken to a temporary accommodation center, where they would be waiting for the rest of their group. He apologized for not allowing the group to see the others. However, he assured them that they would be meeting them soon enough. Tristan's watch then beeped, which signaled that the second group had arrived. He wished them farewell, as his colleagues went to grab more sticks, while Tristan exited the holding room and to the front of the gates. Once Tristan had left, a man by the name of Kay entered the holding room and asked the group to follow him. Compared to Kay, he was much more quiet than Tristan, and did not speak as the group walked to a waiting bus. Kay took the wheel and drove the group to a nearby accommodation center. As the group was descending, he called Aran aside and told him that the base they would be moving into would not be as they expected, as it would potentially be smaller, but more fit for usage. Aran nodded and thanked Kay for the ride, before Kay ushered him out of the bus and drove back to the gates. At the accommodation center, Aran called everyone to the living room, and there, he announced that they would have to share a room with one other person. He also told the group that they would be able to choose who they shared a room with once the others had arrived. Upon seeing the looks on Rue and Santo's faces, he added that there were also larger rooms, which allowed a family to sleep together. However, these rooms were limited, and therefore would be given to families with the youngest children. Rue and Santo nodded, and Aran dismissed the group, shortly before the next group arrived to meet them. After being dismissed by Aran, Viscera walked to the top of the accommodation center and looked out over the city of District X. According to a book she had found, District X was roughly 4 times the size of the capital, and was split into 11 sectors and a center. In the first sector, there was an entrance to the city, as well as all the housing areas for the guards who worked there. The entrance sector did not house any normal citizens of the district. Of the remaining 10 sectors, the book stated that each was roughly the same size, and each sector had different sports teams, specialty dishes, and traditions. By reading the book, Viscera learned that diversity was one thing District X was known for. After some more reading, the book stated that District X received frequent rainfall, as it had been built in an area that was once known as the Amazon. Although the records claim that the Amazon was a gargantuan rainforest, our research states that hundreds of years before the disasters of North America, the Amazon was an online shopping site where people could have goods delivered to their houses by tapping a few spots on their ancient glass screens. According to saved records, the Amazon was known for its unique wildlife, tall trees, and frequent rain. District X was built within the heart of the Amazon, in an area that had been cleared out by deforestation. When the trees had been cleared out, it also allowed the rain that very frequently swept the area to fall directly onto the heads of those underneath, instead of being blocked by the canopy of the rainforest. In the center of the city, the government buildings lay. The center was also where news conferences took place. As the Viscera began to put the book away, Root Rolex, 20-year-old son of Easter and Tulip, entered the room. Root had been assigned to the second group, and had just arrived. Viscera noticed Root and said hello before putting the book away and standing up. Root smiled at Viscera, and the two walked onto the balcony together. On the balcony, Root pointed out the beauty of District X, and Viscera began to tell him about the history of the city, as well as the way the sectors were organized. After talking with Root for a while, Easter stepped onto the balcony and patted Root on the shoulder, before telling the pair that the third group had arrived. Root then asked his father how many groups there were, to which he replied that there were 5 in total, and that 3 had arrived so far. Easter then left the balcony and told Root that Root told Viscera that it was nice meeting her. Viscera smiled at Root before Root left the balcony, leaving Viscera to stare out at the city alone. When the final group had finally arrived at the accommodation center, Maxima used the loudspeaker to call the large group to the first floor for dinner. After skipping lunch, they seemed very pleased to see that Ava and Sandy had prepared a large dinner of chicken, pie, salads, fish, and cheese. Unlike the cornucopia in the cave settlement, there were 3 long tables in the accommodation center, since the building could not fit 1 long table in it. After eating, Maxima announced that everyone should find a partner to share a room with, but families of 3 or 4 could have a room to themselves. The accommodation center of District X was split into 6 floors. On the first floor, there was a large living room, a kitchen, and a dining room, and an arcade, which Deck and Denham had spent a lot of time in. Outside, there was a big garden and a swimming pool. On the second floor, there was a theater, a lounge, a gym, and a multi-purpose room. The third, fourth, and fifth floors were entirely composed of bedrooms, some of which were large and others smaller. Before bedtime, Viscera seemed lost for a partner. However, Root approached her and asked if she wanted to share a room. Viscera happily agreed, and together they shared a room for the night. Although they slept on different beds, when Viscera and Root awoke in the morning, they chatted and further strengthened their bond. Those who didn't wake up early were awoken eventually after Maxima made an announcement, telling everyone to report to the living room. Once at the living room, Maxima announced that everyone would be transported to the new base, which was outside the walls of District X in the same groups that they had been in for the train ride, but by hovercraft. The journey was very short, and the group was able to get to their destination very quickly. Once they had all reached the new settlement, Maxima told them that they would be raiding the capital the same day. It was discovered that she had been speaking with her commanders, Aran, Easter, Gale, Dollar, Focus, and Sheer, about the plan. Many of the other residents complained, saying that they wanted to go. However, Maxima stated that this trip would be just to assess the situation and rescue Game Maker Blanco. Before leaving, Dollar kissed his wife, Petunia, and his kids, Quartz and Hazel, and did the usual goodbye I love you stuff. Focus did the same to Sandy and Deck, and told Sandy to keep preparing the good dinners and to look after Deck, while Sheer did the exact same thing to Ava, but referencing Denham, which made Sandy and Ava laugh. Maxima, Aran, Easter, Gale, Dollar, Focus, and Sheer were nicknamed the Secret Seven during this mission, in which the primary goal was to rescue Game Maker Blanco. Although he was not part of the mission, Oregon flew the hovercraft, which had advanced cloaking abilities and a variety of other abilities. Once near the capital, however, several planes that patrolled the air noticed the hovercraft. Upon identifying it as a foreign craft, they opened fire on it. Despite only getting hit by bullets, the sheer quantity of bullets forced Oregon to steer the hovercraft in a sharp curve. Gale told Oregon to prepare a missile, which Oregon did, and when close enough, Oregon launched the missiles. Maxima smiled as the missile took out the three pursuing planes together. Oregon then told the Secret Seven to prepare for landing, and with their parachutes ready, Oregon flew over the top security building, where war prisoners were located, and opened the hovercraft's hatch. He looked back just in time to see Gale salute him as he jumped out of the hovercraft with his gun at the ready. Once the Secret Seven had landed on top of the building, they were immediately cornered by peacekeepers, who told them to freeze. Gale calmly froze and dropped his gun, and the second it hit the ground, Oregon, who was still flying up in the sky, dropped a special type of rocket, which caused lots of smoke when it hit the top of the building. The peacekeepers fired into the smoke, but the bulletproof armor designed by the rebel stylists protected the Secret Seven from getting wounded. Once the smoke had finally cleared, the Secret Seven had entered through a hatch in the roof of the building. Inside the building, the group held their guns at the ready, as Maxima placed down a mine, which would detonate if any peacekeepers attempted to follow them through the entrance. This proved to be a smart idea, as a few minutes after they left the trapdoor area, an unfortunate peacekeeper jumped down and had his genitals blasted off. The prison was not a normal prison, but in fact a laboratory. This is where the Capitol ran tests on criminals. As the Secret Seven walked past a shark tank, the explosion occurred, causing Maxima to tell the others to act quickly. Alarms boomed out through the laboratory, which made the rebels shoot bullets into several cameras and alarms, while they searched the laboratory. Voices from the main entrance became louder and louder until Maxima ordered the group to prepare themselves for defense. Hiding behind a cluster of stray boxes, the Secret Seven held their weapons ready, and shortly afterwards, a group of peacekeepers turned the corner, with their leader holding a rocket launcher. Back in the base, the others had explored the area. The base was smaller than the accommodation center and was surrounded by thick walls. While Maxima was gone, Sheaf, who had been very quiet until now, informed everyone about the importance of staying inside the walls, as the wildlife outside could be deadly. The base itself was composed of a large, long building and an outdoor yard. The outside consisted of 3 floors. On the second and third floors, there were only bedrooms. On the first floor, only essential rooms were built. These were limited to a kitchen, a dining room, restrooms, and a meeting room. Outside, there was much more space. The architects had intended that the children spend more time socializing outside, as they had included a pool, a football field, a basketball hoop, a shed containing a bunch of equipment, and a small playground. On the chairs beside the pool, Viscera had made 2 glasses of lemonade and sat down with Root. As they watched Deck trying to teach Denim how to swim, they talked about their lives in their respective districts prior to the games. Limerick, who was supervising the pool as a lifeguard, occasionally looked back towards Root and Viscera, but they did not notice him. In the pool, Zale and her husband, Hunter, were assisting their 2-year-old son, Delmar, in swimming, while the reincarnation of Baffin watched from the side. After leaving Delmar with Hunter, Zale swam over and sat down on the edge of the pool with Baffin, and together they said some very deep thoughts about Baffin's reincarnation. Baffin was known to have said that it felt weird, and he felt sorry about all the dead that could not be reincarnated, but Zale comforted him. Back in the laboratory, Maxima had shot and killed the Peacekeeper with a rocket launcher before he could pull out the trigger, which caused the other Peacekeepers to open fire on their group. However, frantic shouts of "stop" came from around the corner, although this was not necessary as the bullets bounced harmlessly off the Secret Seven's armor. The Peacekeepers reloaded their bullets, as lead Peacekeeper Dominus Barrett turned the corner with a loaded machine gun. Barrett ordered the members of the Secret Seven to remove their helmets. However, Maxima told him to hand over Game Maker Blanco first. Dominus Barrett recognized Maxima and asked if she really was Maxima. Barrett told her that he did not believe what was happening and apologized. However, Maxima told him one last time to hand over Game Maker Blanco, or else she would kill him. Barrett laughed and told her that he was no longer the kid that had asked for her autograph at the train station 20 years ago, and that he was now going to be serving the capital at any cost. Fuming, Maxima pulled the switch on her gun and pulled the trigger, which sent an explosive bullet into Barrett's stomach. After being splattered with the blood of Barrett and the other Peacekeepers, Focus told Maxima that there was a trapdoor a few meters away, which they had not explored yet. Maxima spotted the trapdoor and ordered the other 6 to cover her as she attempted to open the locked trapdoor. Maxima was unable to unlock it, and eventually simply gave up by using a rocket attached to her gun to blast open the trapdoor. Maxima ordered Aran, Dollar, and Shear to keep guard before she, Gale, Focus, and Easter entered the underground of the laboratory. Inside, many different mutts were kept. Some of these mutts were failed recreations of powerful monsters. However, others were clearly too dangerous to be let out of their cages. After passing a 3-headed dog, Easter turned on a heat-seeking contraption and scanned the underground lab. They quickly located the only human-shaped figure and ran over. This, indeed, was Christian Blanco. Maxima quickly broke the lock attached to his cell and shook him awake. Contrary to their expectations, Christian saw Maxima and immediately attempted to attack her. Maxima yelped and asked if Christian was all right, but Gale quickly told her not to fight back. Maxima asked Gale why she should do as he said. However, Gale told her that he had experience in this type of event before. Therefore, Maxima stopped moving, allowing Focus to shoot a sedating dart into his shoulder. Maxima yelled at the others, who were currently spraying rocket bullets at Peacekeepers, to come down into the lab. Maxima then used a rocket bullet to shoot a hole in the ceiling, while Gale PA'd Oregon to pick them up. Following the signals their armors sent out, Oregon flew over to the hole in the ceiling and sent down several ropes, while bombing Peacekeepers left and right. Once the Secret Seven had reunited, they grabbed onto the ropes, with Maxima holding onto Game Maker Blanco, and upon returning, they stored him in a holding cell in the hovercraft. Oregon then turned on the rockets of the hovercraft and flew the group into the sky. As Oregon piloted the plane higher into the sky, a missile hit the side of the hovercraft. Oregon shouted and desperately tried to turn the hovercraft towards Capitol Lake. He was not quick enough, and which caused the hovercraft to crash onto the beach. Oregon swore and turned on the emergency boosters of the hovercraft, which exerted nitro fuel powered fire and propelled the hovercraft underwater. There, Oregon typed a series of commands into the control center rapidly, which caused the bombed part of the heavy-duty hovercraft to detach, causing the hovercraft to morph into a submarine. Oregon smiled before turning and piloting the submarine through the water and avoiding a missile, which instead blew the statue of President Ravenstill off its base. The Capitol was clearly not going to give up without a fight, as hundreds of hovercraft flew over the lake. Oregon's smile immediately turned into a frown as he realized that he was trapped within this lake. Maxima swore loudly and asked Oregon to do his last resort, which he had been talking about when the hovercraft had first been created. Oregon nodded and told Maxima to buckle Game Maker Blanco into a seat, before pressing a large red button with a big "No" written on it. With a loud bang, the submarine exploded in a cloud of smoke, and when visibility had finally returned to the lake, the Secret Seven had launched into the air, with Oregon piloting a rocket. During the midst of all this chaos, Mirai Kobayashi, victor of the 94th Hunger Games, was known to have retreated to a cottage in the mountains of District 1, and from there, she watched the news while eating a large bowl of popcorn every day, and frequently invited her friends over to give their thoughts on the war. When Oregon's rocket had finally neared District X, he ordered the passengers to prepare for ejection. Focus began to ask what ejection meant, but his questions was answered, as Oregon, the Secret Seven, and Game Maker Blanco were ejected out of their seats and into the air as the rocket crashed into a river. Oregon, who was strapped tightly in a seat, pressed a button on the side of it, which caused parachutes to erupt out of all the seats. He then pulled a joystick from the side of his seat, and with a complex array of fans attached to the seats, he piloted the paraseats towards the walls of District 6. Maxima yelled at him to avoid the force field, but Oregon knew this and thus landed right in front of the walls. Tristan immediately approached them, and once Maxima told him everything that had happened, Tristan scanned their retinas and fingerprints and took a swab of cheek cells from their mouths. They then walked to the nearby base, with Game Maker Blanco slowly starting to stir. At the base, Gale punched a 20-digit security code into the door, which allowed Rue to open it from the other side. The rest of the settlement clapped and cheered as Easter and Dollard carried Game Maker Blanco on a stretcher to a private bedroom. While Game Maker Blanco was inside his bedroom, Gale took Maxima aside and told her about the danger he may be posing towards her. Gale explained that Peter Millard, victor of the 74th Hunger Games, had experienced the same type of feelings towards his wife, Katniss, after the Second Rebellion. Maxima understood this and told Gale that she would be careful. For the remainder of the day, Game Maker Blanco was kept isolated from the others for health and safety reasons. Unbeknownst to them, the Capitol missile had attached a minuscule tracker to the side of the hovercraft, and had not been blown off when Oregon turned the hovercraft into a rocket. This meant that the Capitol knew exactly where District X was located, as proposed to the rough idea before. Therefore, Rubius Dalton and Aethrix Vonnegut had organized an attack mission on the base, with a clear goal: to kidnap and hold the few children hostage. In the morning, Maxima entered Game Maker Blanco's bedroom, and was relieved to see that Gale had placed a restraining device on him. Maxima pulled out a vial of anti-venom from her pocket, and walked over to his bed. When he opened his eyes and saw Maxima, he immediately tried to attack her. However, his arms had been restrained by Gale's chains, and therefore, Maxima was able to inject the anti-venom into his arm without difficulty. He experienced a slight jolt, but soon afterwards fell asleep, and woke up. Upon seeing Maxima, Game Maker Blanco looked into her eyes and asked where he was. Maxima told him everything that had happened the day before, before unlocking his chains and letting him walk around. At that moment, a voice from the corner of the room asked Maxima if this was a safe idea. Maxima did not flinch at all, but turned her head towards Restoro Diggs, who had exited from the shadows. Maxima squinted towards Restoro. However, she told him that she had full confidence in the anti-venom, as she had requested it from Santo himself. At that moment, Game Maker Blanco walked over and told Maxima that they had arrived just in time to save him. Sensing that he had his memory back, Maxima asked Game Maker Blanco what he meant. He replied that the capital had been planning on completely altering his brain and giving him the powers of animals. He also stated that several other prisoners had already received this treatment, and all of the experiments had gone poorly. Maxima sighed in relief and told him that she would be ready to meet the others soon, before telling Restoro to follow her to the dining room. Game Maker Blanco was the only person of the group to have entered District X before. As he recounted some of his stories to the children, many of the adults, most notably Gale, Rue, and Crimson, asked Maxima if she was sure the anti-venom had worked. Maxima replied that she was positive. Once breakfast had concluded, Maxima began to explain what the group's next plan was, before a large explosion outside caused her to jump backwards. Maxima rarely flinched, meaning that this had clearly caught her off guard. However, a loud voice, amplified by speakers, boomed over the field and into the ground floor of the base. Rubius Dalton ordered Maxima to come out onto the field. However, Maxima was already busy ushering the children through a trapdoor under the kitchen table. Maxima told the kids that anyone 16 or older was allowed to come and fight, while Iris and Avona looked over those who were younger. She also told everyone where the bulletproof outfits were, which made them run quickly and get dressed before any bloodshed. Rubius told the rebels to exit the building and head onto the field, or else he would attack. Maxima mouthed the word quickly to the others, before stashing a pistol in her pocket and calmly walking into the yard. Rubius, his usually calm demeanor, immediately turned into shock upon seeing Maxima step onto the grass. Maxima calmly greeted Rubius like an old friend, before asking what he requested. Rubius laughed upon seeing Maxima, and told her that it was obvious. He stepped down from the hovercraft he was previously standing on, and up close, Maxima noticed that he was wearing the finest capital armor possible. Rubius pulled out a gun, and told Maxima that the days of the Dalton elite were now over, and now, the only way to fight would be with guns. With his gun pointed directly at Maxima, he asked her to follow him onto the covercraft, as there was no point in war. Maxima looked Rubius in the eye before a second loud explosion occurred. Maxima rolled down just in time to see Rubius's bullet pierce a large piece of debris that had flown out in the explosion. A tank with a drill at the end of it emerged from a hole in the ground. In the cockpit, Vulcan Helix yelled at Rubius and told him that he had finished his job. Rubius smiled at Vulcan before telling him to take the hostages to the hovercraft, while he dealt with Maxima. Although the adults had noticed them, Maxima held a hand to the window, which signaled them not to go after the kids who had been kidnapped. Rubius and Maxima looked at each other for a long time, before Rubius finally spoke. Rubius told Maxima that they would have a sword fight to the death, and if she won, the capital would spare the rebel children. However, if he won, he would enter the hovercraft and fly off. Maxima looked towards Vulcan, loading a large metallic box into the back of the hovercraft, and told Rubius, so be it. The adults in the building immediately began to protest. However, Maxima held up a hand, signaling Thibaut Guiraudot to get her sword and shield. As Rubius removed his body armor, Thibaut returned, with Maxima's sword, the Excalibur, and a shield, which was red, blue, and white, with a white star in its blue center. Maxima quickly ushered Thibaut off of the field, and grasped the sword in her right hand, and her shield in her left. On the other hand, Rubius had grabbed his sword, which he nicknamed Harpe, and his shield, which he nicknamed Achilles. A whistle blew out from the hovercraft, which made Rubius wish Maxima luck, before charging. For his weight, Rubius was surprisingly agile. However, Maxima was faster and dodged Rubius's first sword swipe. Maxima then attempted to slash the Excalibur onto Rubius. However, Rubius blocked it with his shield. However, Rubius blocked it with his shield and rolled over on the ground. Maxima laughed and told Rubius that he still had his skills from 86. To this, Rubius replied, "Of course." Maxima then charged forward and swiped at Rubius, but Rubius blocked Maxima's sword with his own and swiped. Maxima blocked Rubius' sword with her shield and thrust her sword forwards, before missing Rubius' stomach by mere inches. Rubius turned around and ran forwards, before pouncing towards Maxima. She was clearly not expecting this, which allowed Rubius to tackle Maxima to the ground. Why is there sound? Oh, where was I? Maxima swore as Rubius thrust his sword at Maxima's heart. However, Maxima had rolled over, causing Rubius' sword to hit the ground instead. Maxima then got up and slashed Rubius. However, Rubius used his shield to block the hit. He quickly removed his shield, and after a tense moment, Maxima threw her shield at Rubius. Rubius gasped as the shield flew like a frisbee and knocked Harpe out of his hand. He quickly attempted to retrieve his sword, but Maxima ran forwards and pounced on Rubius before he could do so. Maxima smiled a bittersweet smile. Before plunging her sword through Rubius' neck. Oh my god, that was so hard. An eerie silence resided throughout the yard. However, Maxima calmly told Vulcan to release the prisoners. Contrary to expectations, Aethrix Vonnegut stepped out from the hovercraft, raised her pistol, and shot Maxima in the stomach. She then tossed the pistol onto the ground and ordered the pilot of the hovercraft to fly away. Maxima swore repeatedly as the hovercraft descended high into the air and flew away towards the capital. Solomon and Ristoro quickly rushed to Maxima's side and loaded her into a stretcher, where she would later be taken to District X for medical care. Meanwhile, the other adults had already organized a rescue mission when a call from District X came in which President Arthur offered to fire a tracking missile at the hovercraft. However, Gale explained what had happened, which made Arthur tell them that if there was any way he could be of assistance, to simply tell him. Meanwhile, the few adults that had been inside the bunker during the time of the kidnapping had exited from the hatch. Corell told the others that Vulcan had used his drill machine to create a hole in the bunker wall, and attached a metal box to the hole. Several peacekeepers had then entered the bunker and forced the kids into the box, while keeping the adults at gunpoint, threatening to shoot if they moved. Corell then burst into tears and apologized, before Baffin immediately ran over and comforted her. Before Gale, Aran, and Focus called the rest of the Secret Seven into a meeting room to work out a plan. By noon, a plan had been made. Gif, who had hacked into Capitol computers several times already, was called into the main technology room, where he was told to help film some propaganda videos, and later to hack into Capitol TV and play those films live. Viscera was also called into the room, where Gale thanked her for not asking about her family. He then sheepishly told Viscera that the Capitol had shot her family members shortly after her victory. To this, Viscera showed almost no emotion, and simply told Gale that she no longer cared about her family after Michelle's death. Gale, who had turned very red, told Viscera that they were going to enter District 10 and film a propaganda video. However, doing so would require attacking the peacekeepers there. Viscera agreed to do so, and after suiting up, she boarded a new hovercraft, with Oregon piloting it. As the remainder of the Secret Seven boarded the hovercraft, Atomica Perez asked about the kids, and asked Gif if he was just abandoning them. Gif blushed and told Atomica that there was no clear way to rescue the kids now, but that their videos would definitely be seen, and would give the children hope. Atomica sighed and shook her head, as the hovercraft door closed. On their way to District 10, Viscera, the Secret Six, and Gif had a brief lunch, which was ended by Oregon telling them to put on their armor. Once they had received District 10, a video call from District X came through. over the hovercraft's screen. Percival, the leader of military affairs of District X, told them to be careful, as the peacekeepers were armed with explosive bullets. The group thanked him for the warning, and along with their guns, they grabbed blast shields, which could be placed over their chests for protection. Oregon then opened the hovercraft's hatch, which saw him salute Gale as he dropped down onto District 10 below. Viscera, who knew the layout of District 10 best, directed the others to land on a nearby barn. The others agreed. However, Giff, who was in the hovercraft, told them that there were peacekeepers climbing onto the barn. Dollar flipped a switch on his gun, and when the ladder reached the top of the barn, he touched the edge of the ladder with the tip of his gun. This caused the peacekeepers to be electrocuted by Dollar. He then radioed Giff, telling him that they needed a way to descend from the barn. Giff radioed back, telling him that Oregon was on his way. Another ladder reached the tip of the barn, which caused Gale to electrocute that one as well. Over the PA, Giff told the group that there were hovercraft approaching, and Oregon was not among them. Surely enough, Shear used a bomb on his gun to take out a small hovercraft, while Focus and Aran opened fire on a slightly larger hovercraft. In this time, Oregon had turned his hovercraft towards the barn. However, he was immediately surrounded by capital bombers. Oregon told Giff to buckle a seatbelt as he entered a password into the keypad, which slid open a small door, revealing a big red button. Oregon pressed the button, which caused the outer layer of metal on the hovercraft to detach and smash into the capital bombers. Oregon then flew down towards the barn, before dropping a ladder. Viscera immediately grabbed onto the ladder. However, Gale told her to let go just in time, as a hot laser sliced the rope ladder off and onto the ground below. With no other options left, Gale asked if Viscera had ever been inside the barn. Viscera nodded and told Gale that there was an attic underneath where they were standing. Dollar heard this and blasted a hole in the roof beneath them. The 7 of them fell through the hole and into the attic, just as parachuting peacekeepers landed on the roof. Oregon himself radioed and told them to hurry up with their mission, as more hovercraft from the capital were approaching. From his side pocket, Shear pulled out a small camera, which he used to film Viscera as Dollar and Aran fired rockets at the peacekeepers. Although there was not a lot of light in the attic of the barn, Viscera yelled at the capital that they had taken the lives of thousands of children, as well as some held hostage at the moment. She shouted a variety of rebellious sayings, and when she finished, a rocket flew through the side of the barn wall, launching the peacekeepers and the rebels out into the air. Up in the air, Giff and Oregon had seen this rocket, but had been too late in warning their comrades. As luck would have it, the rebels had been too preoccupied to take off their parachutes, which saw them open up in midair and cushion their hard falls. The peacekeepers, however, were not so fortunate, as they had removed their parachutes and died in the explosion. The rebels had been able to land near a river, and thus were able to escape the blow without much trouble. Oregon then flew down to pick them up. However, his hovercraft was smashed as a capital plane flew into it. Oregon and Giff both screamed. However, the Luther family had always incorporated emergency settings into their hovercraft, which saw Oregon pull a lever and push a button, which allowed the cockpit to eject itself right before the body exploded. Oregon and Giff were now parachuting towards the ground, and although several peacekeepers had died in the explosion, many had aimed their weapons towards the two parachuting in the air. Giff pointed out a hovercraft approaching them in the distance and sighed sadly before yelling at the Secret 7 and Viscera to ignore them. As Giff said a few last words to his wife and kids, he did not notice that Oregon was waving frantically at the hovercraft. Peacekeepers who were now firing into the air suddenly saw the hovercraft. However, they ignored it as it had the capital logo on it. I should not have said the logo. Crest, not logo. When Oregon and Giff were very close to the ground, the front of the hovercraft opened, scooping Oregon and Giff up like a shovel. At the controls of the hovercraft, Mohammed Yusuf high-fived the pilot and said, "Perfect," upon seeing Oregon and Giff in the back. Giff seemed extremely confused. However, Oregon walked up towards the pilot and told them that the others were near the riverbank. The pilot flew downwards towards Viscera and the others and let down a rope, before pulling them up. The pilot then flew the hovercraft away towards District X. On the return trip, the pilot introduced himself as Buster, the brother of Carson Batterson, who had actually been a close friend of Oregon's after he had been resurrected. No, that's not what I meant. Buster is his close friend, not Carson. Carson's dead. Mohammed explained that he had heard of the rebellion in Panem, and as he was the leader of Scotland, he was able to contact Buster and reach District X. He had then flown towards the district in his own hovercraft, which he had disguised to look like one from the capital. But Oregon had spent too many years making hovercraft, and thus recognized it at once. As the hovercraft approached District X, Mohammed told him that he would be staying in the city, while his wife, Cyanid, stayed at home to watch over the children and fill in his job. At the base, Atomica told the Secret Seven, or Six, Mohammed, Buster, and Gift to follow her. Atomica led the group to the living room, where President Hell Neveron was waiting on a video call. Hell smiled happily upon seeing the group enter the living room. Gift immediately ran over to disconnect from the call. However, the button was darkened. This made Hell smile and laugh, as Gift desperately tried to unplug cables and disable the call in any way possible. However, the TV still did not turn off. This led to Gift throwing a chair at it, but it bounced harmlessly off the TV as Hell told him to stop trying. The rest of the adults had also entered the room. While Dollar pointed out that the room Hell was in also happened to be the laboratory they had infiltrated when they rescued game maker Blanco. Hell grinned very mischievously as she congratulated Dollar on making the observation. She then stepped aside, revealing a large tank. Inside the tank, the adults as children were attached to a chair, unconscious, each with a mask attached to their face and a small tube attached to their arm. Hell told them that before the Capitol began running their experiments on them, they would be finding a cure for the sneaky disease they had infected Vulcan, Aetherix, and the Peacekeepers that had gone on that trip with them. She explained that, somehow, the kids had not been infected, which meant that they had all developed some type of immunity. She then cut the camera to show a few sketches she had made, and with a cameraman with her, she walked by some of the children, before telling the rebels what she planned on doing with them. The adults were clearly outraged upon seeing Hell telling them how she was going to turn the children into mutts, and when Hell saw their expressions, she grinned and winked, before walking back to her seat. She then congratulated them on successfully filming propaganda videos. However, she also explained that they had disabled all Capitol TV videos, which meant that even if Gift did hack into the channels, nobody would see the videos. Lastly, she walked over to the glass room where the kids were kept, and told them that they would be seeing their kids soon enough, but not in the way they expected. At that moment, Duck awoke, and upon seeing his mother and father on the screen in front of him, he yelled at them to watch out. However, a peacekeeper behind him immediately spanked him unconscious, as the call was abruptly cut short. In this time, Gale ran over to the radar room, where he was able to detect a missile coming towards them. Thanks to Deck's warning, Gale was able to send out an anti-missile contraption, which made the missile explode midair and harmlessly become a small fireworks show. The explosion occurred right in the sky outside the base, which made many of the adults gasp at how close this explosion was to the base. Gale immediately turned on the anti-missile functions of the base, and assigned Tebow and Begonia to watch the skies, while he called the rest of the adults together, where they organized a rescue mission. Of the kids, Finnick Jr., Root, Millet Rolex, Alpha Schneider, Viscera, Iris, Mags, and Starting Laurier had stayed behind. Gale explained that during the escape rescue mission, they would have to infiltrate the Capitol. The second he said that, Maxima called the group from her hospital bed in the facilities of District X. Maxima told them that they should attack the Capitol as soon as possible, since it was likely they had not started their experiments yet, and even if they had, it was guaranteed that the experiments had not finished yet. She then ended the call by wishing Gale that the odds would be ever in its favor. As it was currently nighttime, Gale asked if any adults would prefer to remain at the base. Surprisingly, nobody raised their hand. Therefore, Gale told Millet and Root to stay behind, but Easter stepped up and advised against it. He stated that they were stronger in numbers, and that someone from District X could easily step in and keep watch. Gale agreed, and therefore he called Lancelot, a guard from District X, to step in and watch over the base, while Oregon and Buster each flew a hovercraft from the Capitol. Each hovercraft was one of what Oregon and Buster called trump card hovercraft. These hovercraft were equipped with many functions, most of which would not be used, but could be crucial to the survival of its passengers at certain times. Gale's plan was to launch a strike right at dawn, which saw the passengers get some sleep in the hovercraft right before the attack. In the morning, Gale made an announcement into both hovercraft from a PA in Oregon's craft. Gale told everyone to wake up and dress up. He then told them that the roof of the lab was too tightly guarded by anti-aircraft, meaning that they would be forced to invade from the streets of the capital. He then wished everyone luck and ordered Buster and Oregon to prepare to drop them off. Fortunately for the rebels, everyone was able to get their armor on in time for the drop-off. The low-flying hovercraft deposited everyone off in Capitol Park, where the large group was swarmed by peacekeepers left and right. The peacekeepers opened fire. However, Atomica tossed a force field launching device, which protected the group from the fire. The peacekeepers who saw this did not leave. Instead, they waited outside, as the force field would have to be taken down eventually. Up in the sky, Buster flew downwards and fired several bullets towards the peacekeepers. Upon seeing their colleagues cripple, the peacekeepers started firing at the hovercraft, which allowed Atomica to drop the force field as the others shot the peacekeepers. The group then charged down the street towards the lab, but a large flying chunk of metal caused them to split up. As the chunk of metal crashed into the ground, Gale told the others not to regroup. He then pulled out his gun and fired several rounds at the peacekeepers approaching him. Gale, who was among Easter, Aran, and Dollar's groups, ran around an alley and towards the lab. However, they were stopped when they noticed several white egg-shaped things on the ground. Easter told the others to avoid them, but this proved to be a difficult task, as they were scattered around almost everywhere. When the group had finally made it past the pods, Gale was surrounded by peacekeepers, who fired several rockets at him. As Gale fell backwards, the rest of the group ran forwards and looked at the peacekeepers. They ordered the group to follow them, but the second the lead peacekeeper had turned his back, Lynette shot a knife into his spine. The others proceeded to do the same, which killed the peacekeepers. Solomon, who was among them, immediately crouched down to assist Gale. However, Gale told them to leave him and to go rescue the kids. Solomon simply refused. However, Gale told him to leave him and to go However, Gale became very strict with him and ordered him to let him die. Solomon insisted that he receive help. However, Gale pulled out his gun and shot himself in the neck. After seeing Solomon's face, Solomon shouted at Gale, but Gale had already died. Through tears, Solomon performed a three-finger salute and ran towards the laboratory. In the other group, they had not encountered any pods or peacekeepers, and although they were very surprised, they did not question it until they met up with the others. They then stormed down the road towards the lab, but were very confused when no peacekeepers were present. Dollar told them that this only meant one thing. The peacekeepers were evacuating from a bomb. The group ran quickly towards the lab, and once at the front, Aran and Dollar smashed down the front door. They then ran into the lab and towards the trapdoor. Dollar quickly opened the trapdoor, which had not been repaired since the last time they had gone through it. But the second the last person, Sandy, had stepped through the trapdoor, a lock clicked on the other side, followed by the sound of a peacekeeper moving something heavy on top of it. Easter swore and told the group that they were trapped, but Dollar ignored him and told Easter to locate the cells. Dollar ran through the hallways and towards the cells. However, a voice boomed through several loudspeakers. President Nevron welcomed the group for arriving and thanked them for arriving so quickly. She told them that although they may have reunited with their children, they would not be returning to District X. Hell laughed evilly and told them that now they would be faced with a decision. As the group traveled through the hallway and tried to ignore Hell, she told them that most of them were victors. They would be faced with what she described as the victor's choice. She then turned on all screens in the lab basement and told them that the Capitol had nuclear missiles pointed at District X, and if they did not sign a deal with the Capitol would fire these missiles and murder their kids. Dollar, who was clearly very mad, yelled at Hell to show him the deal. Papers were handed out to the victors, but not the casuals. On the sheet, it stated that a victor could choose to either live in the capital with their children for the rest of their lives or return to their district. Before the 109th Hunger Games, an extra tribute for each gender of the district would be reaped. Immediately, the victors within the lab realized that there was nothing they could do to escape the decision. And once a 1-minute timer appeared on the screens, a pen was passed around through the room, which the victors used to sign their papers. Those who were not victors stayed with their spouses during the signing, talking over the decisions and what was good for their kids. Atomica was even prepared to rip the page. However, she was stopped by Gif, who told her about the severity of the situation. When the victors had all finished signing, the papers were collected and the results documented. The victors who had stayed on the hovercraft during this time were fortunate not to have been inside the lab. However, when communication between the hovercraft and Secret 6 was terminated, Oregon and Buster flew down to investigate, which led to the Capitol destroying their hovercraft. As quickly as the war had launched, the Capitol had been able to suppress it. President Cardew and the Gull 5 were found dead after the Capitol had launched a missile into the mountain. The remaining victors were rounded up and those who had not participated in the war were spared, but those who had helped out were given the victor's choice. As for District X, the Capitol lay siege on its walls for several days, which caused panic in the peaceful society of District X. From the kids' DNA, the peacekeepers in the area were immunized against the disease, while Vulcan, Aetherix, and several other peacekeepers were cured of the disease. When District X asked why the Capitol had surrounded the walls, Kel asked them to hand over Maxima. Although she had recovered fully from the bullet, she too was faced with the victor's choice. She eventually chose to stay within District 2, where she was rejected by many of the district until the events surrounding the 120th Hunger Games. As for the remaining victors, President Neveron displayed the results of the victor's choice signing right after Mohammed escaped from the capital and to Scotland. Annie O'Dare, who was already living in the capital, chose to stay there, as she did not want any more to die in her place. Finnick O'Dare Jr. decided to move to the capital with his wife, Carell, and his daughter, Megs. He had also chosen this to be closer to his mother. Geranio chose to move to the capital, as his daughter was already mature and could easily work in the fields of the capital. Ashta Cedal decided to move to the capital permanently, as she had already spent most of her life there. As for Maxima, she chose to stay in District 2, since she knew that many potential tributes would be delighted to know that there were extra chances of being reaped. Since her son was still growing up, Ava spent a lot of time talking with Sheer about this decision. But as she could not bear the thought of Denham growing up without his friends in District 8, she chose to stay in the district. Ava was later known to have regretted this decision after getting scolded by the tributes that were reaped the following year. Lynette Laurier, who had spent an equal amount of time in the capital and in District 5, chose to stay in the capital as her daughter Starling had many friends there, but also since it would mean not seeing extra tributes reaped. Easter's decision was among the hardest. He talked it out with his wife, since their youngest daughter, Bluebell, was still attending school in District. Although Easter chose to move to the capital, Eventually, Easter chose to move to the capital, but during later nights, Bluebell was heard to have cried a lot about having to leave her district. Madison, Sheaf, and Limerick all chose to stay in the capital, as they did not have families, and therefore had no reason to stay behind in their district, although Limerick frequently reminisced about District 4 with some of his friends. Crimson, Plasma, Rue, Santo, and Solomon had gathered together and spoke about their decisions together. Rue's daughter, Katniss, was beginning to start school, while Crimson and Plasma's children were already in school. Eventually, Solomon offered to stay in the capital, while Crimson, Rue, Plasma, and Santo reluctantly chose to remain in their district homes. With 6 children, Gif had spent a lot of time discussing things with his wife. During the signing, he was heard at several points in time have stated that he wished his children were with him. Eventually, Gif signed to remain in the district, as his 2 youngest children were in school there. Delphine and Iran had chosen to remain in the district, where Iran later insisted Delphine in mentoring. Delphine was known to have later revealed to her close friends that she had chosen this decision to tell the other tributes the truth and inform them about the brainwashing the capital had done to them. Sandy spoke with her husband Focus about Deck's future and decided to stay within District 4, as it would be the healthiest option for their family in the near future. Sandy and Focus both later revealed that they felt guilty about having 2 children sacrificed for one of their own. Before Petunia had even discussed with Dollar, he had signed to stay in District 1, since the tributes there would most likely be frustrated with him for not allowing them extra spots in the games. Atomica, Tritica, and Wither had all chosen to stay in the capital, since they had no spouse and therefore no good reason to stay within their district. Zale and Hunter decided to sign with the capital as well, with Zale later reasoning that their son was not yet at school age, so no social relationships were affected. Solomon and his wife, Fleming, chose to move to the capital, where they later had children. The final decision was that of Viscera's. Viscera's chose to move to the capital, where she later married Root. As for the district victors of the 100th Games, they were sent back home, where they lived normal lives as reincarnations. As a reminder of the capital's kindness, the non-victors who assisted in the war were sent home, where they served a month in a district prison before returning to their previous lives. Bravo Balayev and Aroma Paddock were permanently banned from designing in the capital, and they later moved to District 8, where they had children and formed strong bonds with Ava. A few weeks later, Capital forces entered District X, where they discussed trade offers with the city. Sidney Quain, accompanied by Aetherix Vonnegut, were sent to the capital were sent by the capital to attempt to negotiate with the city. Sidney was able to discover that the district was short on medical supplies and was only able to accommodate the most severe injuries. Eventually, the capital signed a deal with the city, claiming that if the city allowed capital citizens to follow and watch the city's competitions, the capital would supply medical supplies from District 12. Although Hell had allegedly wanted to have tributes from District X in the Hunger Games, Sidney advised against it, as District X's military was about twice the size of the capital's, even though they never used it. District X had also made efforts to negotiate with the capital about an end to the Hunger Games. However, Hell never told them to mind their own business, as they could not manage how Pan Am operated.